Hello, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. The library carried the faint scent of old paper and polished wood, a haven where Isla Munro had spent most of her 26 years. Her fingers brushed the spine of a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, its pages softened by countless hands. Life in the small town of Willow Creek moved at a gentle pace, and Isla blended into it like a quiet melody, easily overlooked, yet impossible to replace. She was the librarian who knew every book, the girl who smiled at children during story hour, the one who had never left town, never been kissed, never been in love. A late bloomer, her mother had once said, though lately Isla wondered if she'd ever bloom at all. Her life was simple and predictable, until the evening her father stumbled through the oak doors of the library, pale and red-eyed. "Isla," he rasped, clutching the counter, "we're in trouble." She closed the book she'd been sorting, her stomach twisting. "What did you do?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "Debt. It's piled up. I thought I could win it back." "Gambling. Bets?" His voice cracked. "They're going to take the house." Isla's heart sank. She knew about her father's gambling, the late nights at the bar, the promises to stop. But this? Losing the house? The little home she grew up in, where her mother's lavender garden still bloomed? It was all they had left. "How much?" she asked, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. 50,000, he whispered. "And there's no way out. Unless..." "Unless what?" Her tone sharpened. He finally looked up, guilt carving deeper lines into his face. "Damien Blackwell." The name swept through the room like a cold wind. Everyone in Willow Creek knew Damien Blackwell, even if few had ever seen him. A billionaire CEO who had risen from nearby roots, now a ghostly presence in their small world. A name murmured in tales of ruthless deals and an icy heart. He owned half the county's land, the factories, the loans. Why would someone like him care about her father's debts? "He agreed to wipe it all clean," her father went on, his voice barely audible. "The house, the loans, everything. But he wants something in return." Isla's throat tightened. "What does he want?" Her father's eyes dropped to the floor. "You. He wants you to marry him." The trip to the city felt like a dream, the kind where you're falling and can't scream. Isla sat in the back seat of a sleek black car, hands clenched in her lap as the countryside blurred past. Her suitcase held only a few things, a couple of dresses, her favorite books, a photo of her mother. She wore the nicest outfit she owned, a cream blouse and a long skirt, her chestnut hair clipped loosely. She felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. The lawyer beside her, dressed in a razor-sharp suit with an even sharper gaze, handed her a folder. "The contract," he said. 6 months. You'll be Mrs. Blackwell in name only. After that, you're free, and your father's debt is gone." She opened the folder, her hands trembling. The words danced before her eyes. Marriage, confidentiality, no emotional involvement. A transaction, cold and exact, like purchasing a car or a house. Only this time, she was the commodity. "Why me?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "He could have anyone." The lawyer's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Mr. Blackwell doesn't explain his decisions. Sign here." She hesitated, pen hovering above the paper. Her father's broken, desperate face flashed in her mind. The house, her mother's lavender garden. She signed. The Blackwell estate loomed like a fortress of glass and steel, perched on a hill overlooking the city. Isla's breath caught as the car stopped. She had expected wealth, but this was something else. Opulence with the weight of a warning. The driver opened the door and she stepped out, clutching her bag like a shield. Inside, the main hall resembled a cathedral made of marble and crystal, her footsteps echoing in the silence. A woman in a sharp suit appeared, her expression unreadable. "Miss Munro, I'm Claire, Mr. Blackwell's assistant. Follow me." Isla nodded, her heart pounding. The contract was signed, the deal was done, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. She was led into a study lined with books, books she would have loved to explore under different circumstances. Instead, she stood still, waiting for the man who had just purchased her future. The door opened and Damien Blackwell walked in. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, with a presence that seemed to draw all the air from the room. His black hair was slicked back, his suit impeccable, but it was his eyes that stopped her, gray, cold, like a winter sky before a storm. He looked at her, not with curiosity or warmth, but with the detached appraisal of someone inspecting a product. "Miss Monroe," he said, voice deep and clipped, "I trust you understand the terms." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Yes." "Good." He moved to the desk, picking up a pen like he was already dismissing her. "The wedding is tomorrow. Claire will handle the arrangements. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. Don't expect affection and don't complicate things." Her cheeks flushed, not from shame, but a flicker of defiance. "I didn't choose this," she said quietly, "but I'll honor the agreement. Just don't expect me to pretend I'm happy about it." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. Then it vanished, replaced by his icy mask. "Fair enough," he said. "We understand each other." He turned away and Isla was let out, her heart a storm of fear and resolve. She was a bride, but not the kind she'd dreamed of as a girl. Tomorrow she'd marry a stranger, a man who saw her as a contract, not a woman. Yet as she glanced back at the office door, she couldn't shake the feeling that she glimpsed something in Damien Blackwell's eyes. Something not quite as soulless as he wanted her to believe. The city glittered with lights, but to Isla it felt like stepping into a cold cave. The car carried her down wide avenues, past towering skyscrapers that shimmered like distant stars. She sat still, wrapped in a pristine white wedding gown that hugged her slender frame, a sheer veil blurring the fear in her brown eyes. The dress wasn't her choice. Claire, Damien's assistant, had delivered it that morning along with a brief message. "Mr. Blackwell wants everything perfect." Perfect for whom, Isla wondered, when her heart felt like it was sinking in stone. The wedding hall was a masterpiece of extravagance. Vaulted ceilings, glittering crystal chandeliers, white roses arranged in arching blooms. But there were no friends, no family, only a small group of strangers, lawyers, a few of Damien's staff, and a photographer hired to capture this staged, happy moment. Her father wasn't there. He had called that morning, voice choked with apology, but Isla had cut him off. "I'm doing this for you. Don't make it harder." She didn't want to hear excuses. She stood in front of a tall mirror in the waiting room, trying to breathe evenly. The reflection staring back looked foreign, cheeks softly flushed from makeup, lips tinted with pale red, brown hair swept into an elegant updo. She looked like a bride, but felt like a puppet. A knock startled her. Claire entered, expression as emotionless as ever. "It's time, Miss Monroe." Isla nodded and stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. A soft violin melody began to play, but it couldn't calm the storm inside her. When the chapel doors opened, she saw Damien standing at the end of the aisle, stoic in a black tuxedo. He didn't smile, didn't look at her with even a trace of welcome. He just stood there, like a statue waiting. She walked, each step heavier than the last. The eyes of strangers glanced at her, but she focused only on not stumbling. When she reached him, Damien extended his hand, and she placed hers in his. His palm was strangely warm in stark contrast to his cold gaze. "Let's get this over with," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. The ceremony unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. The vows were recited mechanically, devoid of feeling. "I, Damien Blackwell, take you, Isla Monroe, to be my lawful wife." His voice was deep, even, emotionless. Isla repeated her vows, her voice trembling slightly but clear. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Damien placed a brief kiss on her forehead, a gesture more ritual than romantic. The small crowd clapped, but the sound rang hollow. The reception was no warmer. A long table overflowed with lavish dishes, but Isla only sipped a glass of water, her stomach tied in knots. Damien sat beside her, chatting with lawyers and business associates as if she didn't exist. She watched him from the corner of her eye. The way he tilted his head while listening. The way his fingers tapped lightly on the table, like he was counting down the seconds until he could leave. He didn't look at her, not once. Then a waiter accidentally spilled wine on her dress. Isla stood up, apologizing with a faint smile, though her insides were in chaos. She walked toward the restroom trying to blot the stain, but the expensive gown now bore a deep red blotch. When she turned around, Damien was there. He had removed his jacket, and for the first time, his eyes lingered on her for more than a few seconds. "You don't have to apologize for someone else's mistake," he said, his voice low but not entirely cold. He held out his jacket. "Cover it up. Don't let them see." Isla blinked, caught off guard by the gesture. She draped the jacket over her shoulders, the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and a hint of mint enveloping her. "Thank you," she said quietly, but he had already turned away, heading back to the table as if nothing had happened. At the end of the evening, as they walked out to the car, Damien spoke, his voice dry. "This is just a transaction, Miss Monroe. Don't expect anything more. I'm not the kind of man who loves, and I don't need you pretending to love me." Isla clutched the edge of his jacket, pride flickering like a small flame. "I don't intend to pretend," she replied, meeting his eyes. "But I'm also not the kind of person you get to belittle. If this is a deal, I'll uphold my end. But don't think I don't have dignity." For a brief moment, Damien's eyes flickered. Surprise, perhaps, or a reluctant hint of respect. He said nothing, just gave a slight nod and opened the car door for her. As the vehicle pulled away, carrying them toward his estate, Isla looked out the window, her heart pounding. She didn't know what the next 6 months would hold, but she knew one thing. Damien Blackwell might think he held all the power, but she was no pawn to be moved at will. The Blackwell estate was cloaked in darkness, save for the dim golden glow of wall sconces lining the long hallway. Isla stood before the door to the master bedroom, clutching the hem of the white silk nightgown Claire had prepared. The delicate fabric clung to her body, leaving her feeling more exposed than she ever had. Her heart pounded, each beat a sharp reminder of what might await her tonight. She was Damien Blackwell's wife, on paper, but the contract didn't specify whether that title came with marital obligations. She drew in a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. She had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Damien coldly demanding she do her duty, or worse, ignoring her entirely like he had during the reception. Whatever happened, she was determined not to crumble. She hadn't chosen this marriage, but she could choose how to face it. The door creaked softly as she pushed it open. The room was vast, with a king-size bed draped in black silk, a fireplace crackling gently, and a large window overlooking the glittering city below. Damien stood near the window, his back to her, still wearing the white shirt and dress pants from the ceremony, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. He didn't turn around immediately, but Isla could sense the tension in his posture, like a caged animal barely in check. "You came," he said, his voice deep and emotionless. Finally he turned, his gaze brushing over her, pausing briefly on the nightgown before looking away. "Sit. We need to be clear about a few things." Isla walked to the armchair near the fireplace and sat down, hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide the tremble. "About what?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Damien moved closer, stopping a few feet away. His gray eyes were cold, yet something flickered behind them, as if he were wrestling with himself. "I don't want any misunderstandings. This is a transaction, and I expect it to remain clear. I don't need you to do anything but show up when required, stay quiet about the contract, and don't cause trouble." She nodded, though a feeling of injustice stirred inside her. "I understand, but if you think I'm going to cling to you or use your money, you're wrong. I'm not that kind of woman." He raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching. Not quite a smirk. "Good. I've dealt with enough of that type." He stepped a little closer, studying her. "But you're different, or you're very good at pretending." "I'm not pretending," Isla replied, her voice sharper than she intended. "I just want to survive the next 6 months, keep my promise to my father, and leave." Damien was silent, his eyes locked on hers. Then unexpectedly, He sat in the chair opposite her, separated only by a small table. Then tonight, he said, his tone low, we should set boundaries. I don't want you to feel pressured into anything. Isla blinked, caught off guard. She had braced herself for a cold, demanding Damien, but these words left her disoriented. She inhaled slowly and chose to be honest. I've never. She stopped, her cheeks burning, then forced herself to continue. I've never been with anyone like that. If you want to, I won't resist. But don't do it out of obligation. I don't want that. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment the room held its breath. Damien stared at her, eyes widening slightly, a flicker of shock passing over his face before he masked it. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees as if trying to decipher her. You're telling the truth, he murmured. Not a question, but a realization. She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. I'm not lying. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then Damien stood and approached her. Isla tensed, heart pounding, but he merely stopped in front of her, looking down with an expression she couldn't read. Go to bed, he said hoarsely. I won't touch you. Not tonight. Not out of duty. She looked up, startled. But the contract doesn't say I have to force you, he cut in, his voice firm but not angry. He turned toward the bed, stripping off his shirt and tossing it onto a chair. You sleep on the left. I'll take the right. Don't cross the line. Isla stood, her legs trembling slightly as she made her way to the bed. She pulled back the covers and lay down, her body taut with nerves. Damien turned off the light, and darkness filled the room, save for the soft glow of the fireplace. She heard him settle onto the mattress, a comfortable distance away, his breathing steady, but not relaxed. She lay there, eyes wide open, waiting for him to change his mind, to speak harshly, to do anything. But nothing happened, only silence. And gradually his breathing slowed, deepened. She turned her head, peering into the shadows. He was lying on his side, facing away from her, but his posture was no longer rigid. He was asleep. Isla closed her eyes, trying to quiet the storm inside. She had braced for a night filled with fear, but instead Damien had given her something she hadn't expected. Safety. As she drifted towards sleep, one thought surfaced. That tonight, for the first time in years, Damien Blackwell might have found rest too. Morning light filtered through the silk curtains, casting a pale glow across the polished hardwood floor of the master bedroom. Isla woke up with her body stiff from a night spent sleeping tensely, as if afraid to cross the invisible line Damien had drawn. She glanced to the right side of the bed. Empty. The blankets were neatly folded, no sign of Damien, as though he'd never been there. The clock on the nightstand read 7 a.m., but his absence made the room feel colder than the soft sunlight. She sat up, the silk nightgown slipping from her shoulder, and instinctively pulled it back up, though no one was there to see. The Blackwell estate was quiet, with only the faint sound of birdsong drifting in from the garden outside. Isla stood, choosing a simple light blue dress from her suitcase, determined not to let this luxurious place consume her. If she had to live here for 6 months, she'd find a way to make it feel just a little like home. The kitchen was at the end of the hall, a modern space with marble countertops and gleaming appliances Isla had never seen before. She opened the fridge and was surprised to find it fully stocked. Fresh vegetables, meats, cheeses, as if someone had known she'd be coming. Claire, most likely. Isla gave a small smile, grateful for the thoughtfulness, even if it came from someone simply following orders. She began cooking, a familiar act that calmed her nerves. The scent of toast and fried eggs filled the air, and she brewed a pot of Earl Grey tea from a box she'd found in the cupboard. As she was setting breakfast on the table, she heard footsteps. Damien appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a crisp suit, his hair still damp from a shower. He paused, his eyes flicking over her and the table, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he masked it. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice deep but not harsh. Isla set the plate down, trying to remain casual. "Breakfast. I thought maybe you'd want something before heading to work." He raised an eyebrow, stepping into the kitchen, though he didn't sit. "I don't eat breakfast at home. Someone handles that at the office." "Oh." Isla felt her cheeks warm, but shrugged, masking the awkwardness. Then I'll eat alone. No problem. Damien looked at her for a moment, as if weighing something. Then he turned to leave, but before disappearing down the hallway, he said, "Don't overdo anything. Claire will show you how this place works." His tone was flat, but there was something, just a hint of concern, that Isla wasn't sure she imagined. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Damien left before she woke and came home late, usually when she was already reading in the study or tending to the backyard. The estate was so large that they rarely crossed paths, and when they did, he offered only a nod or a few clipped words. Isla didn't push conversation. She didn't want to intrude or seem like she was trying to win him over. Instead, she found joy in the little things. The garden became her sanctuary. It had been neglected, weeds overtaking the flower beds. But Isla didn't mind. She pulled weeds, watered, and planted lavender seeds she'd brought from Willow Creek. Each afternoon, she sat beneath the oak tree, reading or journaling, trying to hold on to herself in this unfamiliar world. She also started cooking regularly, always leaving a portion in the fridge for Damien, though he never touched it. One evening, while Isla was baking cookies after a long day in the garden, she felt dizzy. The room swayed, and before she could steady herself, she collapsed to the floor, the mixing bowl crashing beside her. When she came to, she was lying on the living room sofa, a blanket over her. Damien sat across from her, his jacket off, his expression filled with worry, a rare replacement for his usual cold mask. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice tense. "Claire found you passed out in the kitchen." Isla sat up, her head still buzzing. I was just tired. I spent all day in the garden and probably forgot to drink water." He frowned, stood and turned, not to leave, but to grab a glass from the table. He handed it to her. "Drink this, and don't let that happen again. You don't have to act like a maid." She took the water, surprised by his concern. "I'm not doing it out of obligation," she said softly. "I like taking care of the garden. It makes me feel peaceful." Damien looked at her, and something in his gaze softened. "Peaceful," he repeated, as if the word was foreign to him. He didn't say more, but as he left the room, he paused at the doorway. "There'll be a doctor here to check on you in the morning. Don't argue." Isla nodded, her heart beating a little faster. When he disappeared down the hallway, she looked down at the glass in her hands, feeling as if a small door had opened between them. Damien Blackwell, the man with the frozen reputation, had been worried about her, even just a little. And in that moment, Isla realized she didn't just want to survive the next 6 months. She wanted to understand him, even if just a little bit. Rain fell gently against the windows, drops streaking down the glass and blurring the city lights. Isla sat in the mansion's reading room, a copy of Jane Eyre open on her lap, but her eyes no longer followed the words. Her thoughts drifted, lost in recent days. The brief moments when Damien's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, or the deep timbre of his voice when he ordered her to rest after her fainting spell. Something was shifting, slowly, like water wearing away stone. But she didn't dare hope, not with a man like Damien Blackwell. She stood, set the book on the table, and walked into the hallway. The estate was quiet, filled only with the sounds of rain and her soft footsteps on the wooden floor. Damien wasn't home. He rarely was in the evenings, and Isla had grown used to his absence. But tonight, something tugged at her, an odd urge, as if the house itself was whispering, beckoning her to explore the parts of it she hadn't yet touched. She stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall. Claire had once referred to it as Damien's private quarters. It wasn't locked. After a moment's hesitation, Isla pushed it open. The room was smaller than she expected, almost modest compared to the rest of the opulent estate. A worn wooden desk, a bookshelf filled with hardbound books, and a leather armchair near the window. Nothing here matched the Damien she thought she knew, the cold man in sharp suits, but hinted at another version of him, someone she hadn't met. She approached the desk, her fingers brushing a picture frame lying face down. She knew she shouldn't, but curiosity overruled her. She flipped it over and found a photo of a young woman, blonde, smiling radiantly like sunlight. Behind her stood Damien, younger, his eyes not yet touched by frost, one arm wrapped around her shoulders. Isla felt a pang in her chest. Not jealousy, but a sudden, aching sadness. He had once been happy, once loved. What had turned him into the man she knew now? She set the frame down, feeling like she'd intruded on something sacred. Turning away, her eyes landed on a small wooden box on the desk. The lid was slightly ajar, revealing a folded piece of yellowed paper. She hesitated, but her hand moved on its own, lifting the page. Handwritten words appeared, firm strokes laced with raw emotion. My love, I don't know how to keep living without you. The accident, it was my fault. I was driving. I wasn't watching the road. If I could trade my life to bring you back, I would. I'm sorry, Elena. I'm sorry for destroying us. Isla read the letter, breath catching in her throat. The paper trembled in her hands. Damien had lost someone he loved, and he blamed himself. An accident. Elena. The pieces began to fall into place, explaining the icy walls he had built around his heart. She carefully folded the letter and returned it to the box, but the weight of it stayed with her. The next day, Isla stood in the garden, soft sunlight filtering through the trees. She held a small bouquet of freshly picked lavender, its scent gentle and comforting, reminding her of her mother and peaceful days in Willow Creek. She looked toward Damien's office window, where she knew he was working. Without thinking too much, she went inside, found a small vase, placed the lavender inside, and set it in front of his door. No note, no explanation, just a quiet gesture, a wordless comfort. That evening, when Damien returned, he paused at the door to his study, his eyes falling on the purple bouquet. He stood there for a long moment, his hand lightly brushing the petals. No one saw it, but the corner of his lips curved, just slightly, a faint, almost involuntary smile for the first time in years. He knew it was Isla. Only she, the quiet woman who had drifted into his life like a breeze, would have done this. He didn't say anything, didn't seek her out to thank her. But when he picked up the vase and carried it into his office, he placed it beside the face-down photo of Elena. Meanwhile, Isla lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, torn with conflicting emotions. She knew she was starting to care about Damien, not because of the contract, not out of gratitude, but because she saw the broken pieces inside him, pieces she longed to help mend, even just a little. But she was afraid she was just part of a transaction, that the 6 months would pass and she would walk away with a shattered heart. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Don't fall for him, Isla. Don't." But deep down, she knew it was already too late. The morning in the Blackwell estate felt different, as if the air had softened ever so slightly after Isla left that bouquet of lavender outside Damien's door. She didn't mention it, and neither did he. But that morning, when Isla went to the kitchen to brew tea, she found a box of chocolate chip cookies on the counter, along with a small handwritten note. "Thank you." She smiled, her fingers brushing the strong, slanted handwriting. Her heart skipped a beat. It was the first time he left any sign of his presence, a small gesture, yet enough to make her wonder if the wall between them was beginning to crack. The day passed quietly. Isla spent time in the garden, tending to the newly blooming flower beds. But as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Claire appeared, holding a large, silver-wrapped box. "Mr. Blackwell has requested that you get ready for tonight," she said, her voice as even as always. "A charity gala. He wants you to accompany him." Isla blinked in surprise. "Me? But why?" She had never attended any event with Damien before, and the thought of a room full of strangers sent a ripple of anxiety through her. Claire shrugged and set the box on the table. "He didn't say. Open it. I'll help you prepare." Inside was a white dress, simple but elegant. The silk hugged her figure softly, with a tasteful V neckline and a skirt that flared gently. Not flashy, but beautiful in a pure, understated way, as if chosen specifically for her. Isla slipped into the dress and stood before the mirror, feeling like someone else. Claire styled her hair in a low bun, leaving a few strands loose, and applied soft makeup that brought out her brown eyes and fair skin. When Isla looked at her reflection, she no longer saw the small-town girl from Willow Creek. She saw a woman, still herself, but stronger, more assured. As she descended the stairs, Damien was waiting in the foyer. He wore a black tuxedo, sharp and refined as ever, but when he saw Isla, he froze. His eyes swept from her hair to her sparkling shoes, then paused on her face, his gray gaze briefly lighting up before he turned away, masking whatever he felt. "You're ready," he said dryly, but his hand lingered for a moment when he opened the car door for her. The gala was held in a luxurious hotel ballroom, glittering with chandeliers and the soft hum of elite conversation. Isla felt out of place among the dazzling gowns and unfamiliar chatter, but she stood tall, doing her best not to show it. Damien introduced her to a few people, referring to her simply as "my wife." Short, unembellished, but he never strayed far, always close enough for her to feel his presence. Things went smoothly until she appeared. A tall redhead in a curve-hugging dress, her smile radiant but her eyes razor-sharp when they landed on Isla. "Damien, it's been too long," she purred, voice sugary with venom. "And this is your new wife? What a surprise. I thought your type was a bit more dazzling." Heat rushed to Isla's face, but she didn't lower her head. She smiled, voice calm yet cutting. "I think his type is someone who doesn't need words to prove her worth, but thanks for your concern." The room fell silent for a beat, then a few quiet chuckles rippled through the crowd. The redhead stiffened, her smile faltering before she slipped away. Damien looked at Isla, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Well done," he murmured as they stepped onto the dance floor. He held out his hand, and she placed hers in his, her heart pounding as he pulled her into a slow waltz. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, his eyes, his hand warm against her waist. "You weren't afraid of her," he said, not as a question. "I'm not afraid of words," Isla replied, meeting his gaze. "I only fear things that truly matter." He didn't respond, but his expression softened, like he was seeing her for the first time. When the music ended, he didn't immediately let go, and a quiet current passed between them. On the drive home, rain began to fall. Drops drummed against the windshield, creating a chaotic rhythm. Damien drove in silence, the air between them heavy, as if both were holding back something neither dared to speak. Suddenly, he pulled the car over on a quiet street. Isla turned to him, confused. "What?" She didn't finish. Damien leaned over, his hand lifting her chin, and kissed her. Her first kiss, fierce, warm, filled with rain and the scent of his cologne. She froze for a second, then closed her eyes and let herself fall into it. The storm outside raged, but inside that moment, there was only him and her. When he pulled away, both of them were breathless. Damien stared at her, his eyes filled with conflict, like he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice rough. "I didn't mean to." Isla touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his. "Don't apologize," she said, voice trembling but firm. "Just don't do it if it's not real." He didn't answer. He started the engine and drove on, but his hand gripped the steering wheel tightly, as if battling something inside himself. Isla turned to the window, her heart in chaos. That kiss had changed everything. She was no longer the girl just trying to survive a contract. She wanted him, not Damien Blackwell, the cold billionaire, but the man who trembled when he kissed her in the rain. The soft morning light spilled through the dining room windows, illuminating the dewdrops clinging to the lavender beds outside. Isla sat at the table, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, but the warmth did nothing to ease the cold settling in her chest. The kiss in the rain the night before still haunted her. Fierce, unexpected, like a spark igniting in the middle of a storm. But now in the clarity of daylight, she couldn't stop wondering. Why had Damien kissed her? Was it a moment of impulse? A gesture of obligation as a husband in name only? Or was it something real? She heard his familiar footsteps approaching down the hall. Damien stepped in, sharp as ever in his black suit, but something was different, a subtle gentleness in his movements, like the ice around him was slowly melting. He paused when he saw her, his gaze brushing over her face before he gave a slight nod. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep, no longer cold. "Good morning," Isla replied, trying to keep her tone even despite the pounding in her chest. She slid the toast plate toward him, a habit she'd formed over the past few weeks. "I made extra. Want some?" Damien looked at the plate, and a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Soft, but enough to warm her a little. He sat down, picked up a slice, and ate in silence. The space between them wasn't heavy like before, but it still brimmed with unspoken questions. Isla wanted to ask about the kiss, wanted to know what it meant, but she was afraid. Afraid he'd call it a mistake. Afraid she was fooling herself. In the days that followed, Damien began to change. He stayed home more often, sometimes returning before sunset, and even sat with her in the reading room, quietly working on his laptop while she read. He started asking her questions about her favorite books, about the garden, about her childhood in Willow Creek. Small questions, but each one chipped away at the wall between them. He even brought home a pot of white roses from a business trip, setting it on the dining table with a simple, "Thought you might like this." Isla smiled, but her heart ached. He was acting like a husband, but was he truly one, or just playing the part to keep their contract comfortable for the next 4 months? One evening, as Isla watered the garden, Damien appeared with 2 glasses of red wine. "Take a break," he said, handing her a glass. They sat on the wooden bench beneath the oak tree, moonlight casting silver over his sharp features, which seemed softer now. "Did you ever think about leaving Willow Creek?" he asked, voice low, eyes on his wine. Isla took a sip, thoughtful. "I did. When I was little, I dreamed of seeing the world, reading every book in every library. But after my mother passed, all I wanted was to hold on to what remained of her." She looked at him, curious. "What about you? Did you ever want to walk away from all of this?" She motioned toward the estate. Damien gave a quiet chuckle, a rare, precious sound. "I have, but I wouldn't know where to go, or who I am without the business, without—" He trailed off, his gaze darkening. "Without everything I built to forget." Isla knew he was speaking of Elena, of the accident, even if he didn't say her name. She wanted to reach for his hand, to tell him she understood the kind of pain that never really leaves, but she didn't. Instead, she said softly, "Sometimes forgetting isn't the only way. Maybe starting over is another." He looked at her, eyes deep and searching, as if trying to find the truth in her words. "You make me want to believe that," he murmured, and in that moment, Isla felt her heart skip a beat. But then he stood, shattering the moment. "It's late. You should get some rest." She nodded, but sleep didn't come easily. Only 2 months remained on the contract. In 2 months, she would leave, and Damien would go back to his life, a life without her. The thought cut deeper than she expected. She realized she loved him, not for his wealth or power, but for the rare, quiet glimpses he allowed her to see. The worry in his eyes when she fainted, the kiss in the rain, the way his fingers brushed the rim of a wine glass when he was lost in thought. But what about him? Did he love her, or was he just playing the part of a good husband to keep things smooth? The next morning, Isla found a small box on the dining table. Inside was a silver necklace with a lavender-shaped pendant. No note, but she knew it was from Damien. She put it on, feeling the cool metal press against her skin, but her joy was mixed with pain. Was this a gift from the heart, or a prop in their charade? She looked at herself in the mirror, eyes glistening. "You can't keep doing this, Isla," she whispered. "You need the truth." That evening, she waited in the sitting room for Damien's return, her fingers clenched around the pendant. "Damien," she said when he entered, her voice trembling but steady, "I need to know. Everything you've been doing, the gifts, the moments, are they real? Or are they just part of the contract?" He looked at her, eyes conflicted. "Isla, He stopped, his fist clenching. "I'm not good at talking about feelings, but you make me feel things I thought were dead a long time ago." His words struck her like lightning, bright and painful. He hadn't said he loved her. He hadn't denied the contract. Isla gave a sad smile, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I understand," she said, turning away before he could see her break. Deep down, she knew she couldn't stay, not because she hated him, but because she loved him too much to stay in the shadows of almost. The dim afternoon light filtered through the reading room window, where Isla often sought comfort in the pages of a book. But today, Jane Eyre lay untouched on her lap, her gaze vacant, lost somewhere between heartbreak and resolve. The kiss in the rain still haunted her, a memory both sweet and cruel. It had stirred something deep inside her, but it also made her realize she was teetering on the edge of a love with no future. The marriage contract had only 2 months left, and she couldn't let herself fall any deeper. Not when Damien had never made his feelings clear. Isla had made her decision. She wouldn't leave, not yet. That would be irresponsible to her father, to the promise she made in the contract. She would stay and complete the 6 months as agreed, but she would close off her heart. No more moonlit conversations. No more smiling at Damien's quiet gestures. She would become the wife in name only, a silent presence, distant and guarded, no longer ruled by emotion. But Damien didn't make it easy. Since the night of the gala, he had changed, noticeably. He stayed home more, bringing her small gifts, a rare book she'd once mentioned, a new lavender plant for her garden. He joined her at the dining table, asking about her day with a gentleness she had never seen in him before. One day, when she accidentally dropped a spoon in the kitchen, he knelt to pick it up and gently took her hand. "Are you okay, Isla?" he asked, his voice low and sincere. She pulled her hand away, her heart aching. "I'm fine," she replied hoarsely, turning away before he could see the tears glistening in her eyes. Every kind gesture felt like a blade, something that made her ache for him and reminded her that it could all be temporary. He could treat her like a real wife, but he still hadn't said he loved her, and she was terrified that when the contract ended, she would be nothing more than a fading memory in his life. Isla began to withdraw. She avoided Damien's gaze, answered him briefly when he spoke, and spent most of her time in the garden or the reading room, anywhere she could escape his presence. But even there, she couldn't escape him completely. One evening, as she was watering the flowers, Damien appeared with a wool coat in hand. "It's cold," he said softly, draping it over her shoulders. "You should stay warm." She froze, tempted to shrug it off, but didn't. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching. He stood there watching her, his eyes full of questions. "Isla," he said, voice low but firm, "what's going on?" "You're not the same. If I did something wrong, just tell me." She turned her face away, taking a deep breath to hold back tears. "I'm just tired," she lied smoothly, but it hurt. "I need rest." She walked past him back into the house, leaving him alone in the garden, eyes full of helplessness. The final weeks of the contract passed in a haze of quiet tension. The more Damien tried to reach her, the more Isla pulled away. He left little notes for her at breakfast, made her meals when she slept late, even offered to take her to visit a historic library in the city. But each time she refused, with excuses of being busy or unwell. She saw the disappointment in his eyes, the hurt he didn't try to hide anymore. But she couldn't risk her heart again. She told herself this was the best way, for both of them. The last day of the contract arrived and Isla was ready. She didn't have much to pack, just her old suitcase, a few clothes, some books, and a photo of her mother. She stood in the bedroom, looking at the space that had once held her hopes, her dreams, and now only sorrow. On the nightstand, she placed the silver necklace with the lavender pendant, along with a short note. "Thank you for everything. I wish you happiness. Isla." When Damien came home that night, he found the room empty. The letter and necklace sat quietly on the table, a silent farewell. He read the note, his hand tightening around the paper. For the first time in years, he felt a hollow space inside him, one he couldn't fill. He had let her go, not because he didn't love her, but because he hadn't had the courage to say he did. He gripped the necklace tightly, his chest heavy. Isla was gone from his life, and this time, he knew he couldn't let her stay gone forever. Are you still following the story? Please leave your thoughts on the story in the comments below. All your comments are the motivation for us to create better stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. Heavy snow blanketed the small town of Willow Creek, coating narrow streets and modest rooftops in white. Isla had returned to her childhood home, where the scent of aged wood and the crackle of the fireplace still held memories of simpler times. But she was no longer the naive girl she once was. She carried a broken heart, and though she tried to hide it, The pain bled through her empty gaze. She had quit her job at the library, unable to bear the curious looks and whispered questions. Now she worked part-time at a small bookstore, hiding among shelves of fiction, trying to forget Damien. But every night, when the moonlight streamed through her window, his image returned. His rare smile, the worry in his eyes when she fainted, the kiss they shared in the rain. She told herself leaving was the right choice, that she'd protected her heart. But if that was true, why did it feel like she'd lost a part of herself? At the Blackwell estate, Damien lived like a ghost. The bedroom they once shared was now cold and hollow. The silver necklace with the lavender pendant lay beside her short note. "Thank you for everything. I wish you happiness." He had read that note 100 times, every word a dagger to the chest. He remembered Isla's eyes that night she asked about their relationship. Those brown eyes filled with hope and pain, waiting for a truth he was too afraid to speak. His cowardice had driven her away. Now all he had left was regret. In the early days after Isla left, Damien tried to return to his old routine. He buried himself in work, attending meetings from dawn to dusk, signing contracts, issuing orders, as if being busy could fill the void. For brief moments, he managed to convince himself life would go back to normal, that he could exist as he had before Isla walked into his world, emotionless, unshaken. But every night, when he returned to the empty mansion, reality hit harder. No scent of cookies drifting from the kitchen, no soft footsteps in the garden, no gentle voice echoing from the reading room. He had fallen back into grief. Only this time, it was worse than losing Elena. Because now it wasn't fate that took someone from him, it was him. He often sat in his study, gripping the necklace in his palm, eyes closed, trying to relive every second with Isla. He remembered her smile while tending the garden, the fierceness in her voice when she stood up to the redhead at the gala, the warmth in her kiss beneath the rain. Those memories both nourished and destroyed him, fueling hope, then tearing him apart again. The thought of her moving on, living without him, crushed him. One night when snow fell thick and fast, Damien could take no more. He opened the safe, pulled out the marriage contract, the cold, binding document that once tied her to him, and stared at the ink that had once mattered. Then, without hesitation, he tore it to shreds. Piece by piece, it fell to the floor like fragments of the fear that had caged him for too long. The contract no longer mattered. Only Isla did. He drove through snow-covered roads, heart pounding like it had the first time he saw her. By the time he reached Willow Creek, it was late, the snowfall relentless, but he didn't care. He parked in front of her small house, the golden light from a window flickering like a fragile thread of hope. He stepped out, snow clinging to his coat, and stood at the door, taking a deep breath. This time he wouldn't let fear or the past stand in his way. He knocked. The sound echoed in the quiet night. No answer. He knocked again, louder, voice hoarse. "Isla, it's me. Please, open the door." Inside, Isla sat by the fireplace. Her book slipped from her lap when she heard him. Her heart raced, fear and hope colliding inside her. She wanted to run to him. She wanted to see him, but the pain of the past weeks kept her frozen. Why was he here? To hurt her again? She stood slowly, walked to the door, her hand trembling on the knob. She opened it, and their eyes met. Damien stood in the snow, hair and shoulders dusted in white, his breath visible in the frigid air. He looked at her as if she was the only thing left in the world. Without a word, he stepped forward and pulled something from his coat pocket. Torn pieces of paper, the shredded remains of their contract. "I don't need this," he whispered, voice breaking. "I just need you." Isla blinked, tears welling, but before she could say a word, Damien cupped her chin and kissed her. The kiss was fierce, desperate, full of snow's chill and his warmth. She froze for a second, then closed her eyes, melted into him, gripping his coat as if afraid he'd disappear. The kiss said everything he couldn't. The pain, the love, the regret. They stepped inside, the door closing behind them. In the soft glow of the fire, their bodies found each other. Damien gently slipped off her coat, his hands trembling but certain, as if memorizing every second. Isla responded in kind, finally letting go of every barrier. They belonged to each other, not because of a contract, not out of duty, but because their hearts had chosen it. That night they became one, not bound by paper but by truth. When morning light spilled through the windows, Isla lay in Damien's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. A question she had buried for so long rose to the surface. She looked up at him, her gaze soft but steady. "Damien," she whispered, "why did you choose me? Out of all the women out there, why someone like me? I'm not anyone special." He was quiet for a moment, his hand stilling in her hair. He stared at the ceiling, searching for the right words. Words he had held in far too long. Then he exhaled, voice low and raw. "When I first heard about you from your father's lawyer, I only intended to help someone in debt. But then, I saw you, a photo in the file, standing outside the library, smiling at a child. You didn't know I was watching, but that smile, it reminded me of the days I still believed in something good." He turned to her, eyes dark and earnest. "I've lived in darkness since Elena, Isla. I didn't think I could feel again. But you were light. And I was too afraid to touch it, afraid I'd snuff it out. I married you not because of the contract, but because I wanted you close, even if I couldn't admit it. I was a coward, and I hurt you because of it." Isla blinked, tears shining, but she smiled through them. "You're not hurting me anymore," she said, placing her hand on his cheek. "Not if you're really here, with me." Damien kissed her forehead, holding her tighter. "I'm here, Isla, for good." He brushed her hair gently, voice gravelly with emotion. "I love you, Isla. I was a fool not to say it sooner, but I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." Isla smiled, tears rolling down her cheeks. But this time, they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she whispered, placing her hand over his heart, feeling it beat steady beneath her palm. Outside, snow still fell, but inside that little house, winter had given way to something new. Spring. 1 year later, spring's sunlight bathed the town of Willow Creek, casting a gentle lavender hue over the freshly blooming flower beds. Isla stood in front of the mirror in her father's small house, wearing a simple white floral dress with delicate lace at the collar. There were no chandeliers, no archways of white roses like the first wedding. Just her, in a dress she chose for herself, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked that morning from the garden. She smiled at her reflection, not the frightened girl from a year ago, but a woman who knew what she wanted and who she wanted to stand beside. Today she and Damien would marry again, but this time, for real, no contract, no transaction, only love. A love built from healed wounds, shared silences, and the thousands of small moments that had knit their lives together. Her fingers touched the silver necklace with the lavender pendant. Damien's gift, returned and given back again the night he stood in the snow. It had become a symbol of their journey, from distance to closeness, from hurt to happiness. The small chapel at the end of town had been simply decorated with white ribbons and wildflowers on each pew. The townspeople of Willow Creek, once curious about Isla's mysterious marriage, now sat with warm smiles as if welcoming her home. Her father was there, eyes filled with guilt, but also joy. He held her hand before walking her down the aisle, whispering, "You deserve this happiness, Isla. I'm sorry for pushing you to the edge of it." She squeezed his hand gently, smiling. "I forgive you, and I thank you, because if not for that contract, I wouldn't have met him." When the chapel doors opened, Isla stepped inside, and her eyes found Damien immediately. He stood at the end of the aisle, dressed not in the severe black tuxedo of the past, but in a light gray suit. His hair was slightly tousled, like he had run his fingers through it too many times out of nervousness. But when he saw her, his gray eyes lit up, as if she was the only light in his world. He smiled, a real smile, unguarded, unhidden, and Isla felt her heart overflow. The ceremony was simple, yet full of warmth. They exchanged vows, not scripted, not rehearsed, but spoken straight from the heart. "Isla," Damien said, his deep voice trembling with emotion, You gave me a reason to live again, to love again. I promise to spend my life loving and protecting you, not out of duty, but because you are everything to me." Tears shimmered in Isla's eyes as she replied, "Damien, you showed me that love can heal even the deepest wounds. I promise to stand by you, no matter what life brings, because you are my home." When they exchanged rings, simple silver bands engraved with tiny lavender blooms, applause rose from the crowd. Damien leaned down and kissed her, a soft but profound kiss, a quiet declaration that this time they were truly, eternally each other's. Isla wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling his warmth, knowing she was exactly where she belonged. After the ceremony, a small outdoor reception was held in the garden behind the chapel. Wooden tables with white linens, lanterns strung through the trees, and the gentle hum of violins created an atmosphere of rustic magic. Damien never strayed far from Isla, always holding her hand or resting his palm on her back, as if afraid she might disappear again. He laughed more, talked to the people of Willow Creek, even played with the children darting through the garden. Isla watched him, heart full. The cold, closed-off man who once terrified her was now the man she loved, the one who had opened his heart for her. Then came the surprise. Damien stood with a microphone and announced he had invested in Willow Creek, a new library, an upgraded school, and a community center. "This is my gift to the place that raised the woman I love," he said, turning to Isla with warm eyes. The crowd erupted in applause. Isla threw her arms around him, tears of joy streaming down her face. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I wanted to," he replied, kissing her forehead, "because you deserve it, and because I want to build a future with you, here or wherever your heart leads." As night fell, they stood beneath the moonlight, hand in hand, watching friends and family dance around the bonfire. Isla rested her head on Damien's shoulder, listening to his steady heartbeat. "I once thought I'd never find love," she whispered, "but you changed that." Damien tightened his grip on her fingers, voice low but full of emotion. "And you saved me, Isla. You're the first woman I've truly loved, and the only one I want beside me for the rest of my life." They stood there under the moon in laughter, knowing their journey, from a cold contract to a healing love, had brought them exactly where they were meant to be. The snow from last winter had long melted, and for Isla and Damien, spring had finally come. Forever.